Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Stephanie Tsabanidis. I'm a program coordinator at NYC SBS, and today we are hosting our February workshop with the Van Allen Institute, Design Tools for CBDOs, Building Your Organization's Design Capacity with Van Allen Institute. Next slide, please. So we are partnering today with Van Allen Institute. We are also working with Van Allen this year on the Design Sprints Building Creative Capacity program. So today's workshop is a piece of this program. This program is designed to provide community-based organizations with capacity building and design support, and it is currently ongoing. And we're really excited to get started today. And I think I am handing it off to Andrew from Van Allen.
That's right. Thanks, Stephanie. Can everybody hear me? All right, sorry, just like full disclosure, I've got a sleeping baby on my chest, so trying not to be too loud, but if it gets inaudible, just let me know. But yeah, as Stephanie said, I'm Andrew Brown. I'm director of program at Van Allen and currently co-interim executive director through our new executive director search. Yeah, we're really excited for this session this morning and to be working with SBS on the Building Creative Capacity program more broadly. We're really looking forward to this session. I think one of the reasons why we really like supporting this work with SBS is if you ask people to describe their neighborhood to you, how they feel about it, inevitably they start talking about the commercial corridor, right? The businesses on the street, the sense of vibrancy that's there, maybe not, and definitely vacant storefronts play a part in that story. Right. So to have this opportunity to work with community organizations, to think about strategies for activating storefronts, something that's definitely like in our wheelhouse. As the mission slide says here, we're a 130-year-old design nonprofit that creates more equitable cities through inclusive design. We're always thinking of opportunities to bring designers and community organizations together to bring some vision for shaping the neighborhood to life. And this program is no exception to that. Today's session, we think, is really exciting. When we started thinking about different perspectives or ideas that we could share for people to think about not just activating one storefront in their neighborhood, but to think about it more strategically, we realized there were a lot of perspectives, ideas, people in our network that could share their own stories. They can give people a sense of, what do you want to do or prioritize when you're trying to go again from not just like a one-off activity to something that feels more like an initiative to shape the neighborhood. So over the course of the session, you're going to hear from folks that we've worked with, past and present, who are everything from like taking over a single storefront and thinking about the content and the approach to production there to thinking about, if you want to build an initiative around it to go after multiple storefronts, like how do you put like a brand together for that, right? Like how do you give your initiative or your program some presence, right? And so you're going to hear all these different perspectives. And thank you to all the presenters who are going to be sharing today. Thank you to everybody who's joining us and participating on the call. And last thing I want to say before I hand it over to Joseph, who's the program manager at Van Allen, who's leading this effort for us. This is not meant to be like a one-way stream of information where Van Allen tells you like how to activate a storefront or to think about, commercial corridor revitalization more broadly. We know we have participants on this call who are all in different parts of their journey of redesigning their neighborhoods or revitalizing their neighborhoods. So we definitely want this to be a space where people can share what they've learned, right? And so we have that kind of cross-way sharing across different organizations, different people, different perspectives. So with that, I'll say a final thank you to everybody involved on the SBS side, on the Van Allen side, and everybody's participating today. And hand it over to Joseph to take us through the agenda.
Thank you, Andrew. We'll go to the next slide, Pratik. So before I walk you through the agenda, I wanted to quickly introduce myself as well, and also thank Pratik and Annie, my colleagues who are here. Annie will be creating our breakout rooms. Pratik is manning the slides. Thank you to the both of you. And also for any of you that joined a little bit late, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat with, your name, title, organization. Also feel free to share what brings you here today. A couple things about the session. We will be having a Q&A session at the very end after all the topics, so we will have plenty of time for that. If you fear you will lose your questions because we're talking about a lot of things, feel free to put your questions in the chat. That way we won't lose them. We'll get to them at the very end. We want to answer all your questions. But yes, about myself, I'm Joseph Masana-Crowley. I'm a program manager at Van Alen Institute, and I lead many of our projects and programs here. We work very closely with our community partners. I think there's some familiar faces here. And some of our programs are design sprints. From our design sprints was this initiative called Building Creative Capacity. We received so many applications. We're only able to admit 3 folks. You'll be learning a little bit more about who they are and what those teams are, what their exciting projects are. But I'm very excited about this opportunity to bring together some other ways to give back to the community and all of you wonderful community-based organizations, ways for you to have accessible design, thinking about commercial corridor design, and also if you wanted to take on a storefront activation at a low cost, sort of what that process entails. So again, you'll be hearing from all these speakers. Wanted to say that all of them are near and dear to our hearts here at Van Alen in some way, shape, or form. They've all worked with us before. So for our agenda, our first topic will be commercial corridor design, thinking about big scale, but obviously none of us here, unless someone here is from the Department of Transportation, we're not really going to be redesigning like streets or traffic lanes. So thinking about more tactical ways to do that and how to make them more pleasant and welcoming. Thinking about the power of branding. We also will have a fun activity and we all will be able to take a break because it's a very long session. Then we'll come back and talk about accessible design tools, and we'll talk about storefront activations as a community-based development organization, obviously working within that budget. And next slide, Pratik. All right, I have the real honor of introducing our first speaker. Her name is Diana Araujo. She is an Ecuadorian architect, preservationist, and project manager with experience in design, urban planning, and heritage preservation. She earned her Bachelor in Architecture in Quito, Ecuador in 2010 and received her Master's in Historic Preservation from Columbia University in 2015. She's built her professional career around inclusive design and participatory practices for sustainable development. Some of her most recent roles include working as the technical advisor for Quito's Metropolitan Institute of Heritage, working as an independent heritage consultant for the city of Paramaribo in Suriname, and most recently working as a project manager at Van Alen Institute in New York. That's us, where she was responsible for executing community-driven projects through our Neighborhoods Now and Design Sprints programs. Diana, take it away.
Well, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It's really exciting to be part of this workshop. And my only hope is that I will be able to inspire you with ideas to transform your commercial corridors through urban design, art, and low-cost, high-impact initiatives. So you want to go to the next slide? Tick. I'm sure you're all most aware and know what a commercial corridor is. So I don't want to spend much time going over definitions. However, I thought a quick overview would be a good place to start. So a commercial corridor is a street or a highway lined up with businesses that serve a local community. They often function as public spaces that, if designed correctly, support multiple activities, foster mixed uses, and promote local commercial activity and communities that thrive. Commercial corridors are part of the city's streetscape and will likely look like the image you see on your screen, where commercial activity coexists with pedestrian and automobile car mobility along major roads and intersections. So you see all the components that make out of a commercial corridor. Slide, please. Ideally, a commercial corridor will have the necessary physical characteristics and elements that support mixed uses of a sidewalk, with open storefronts and commercial activity extending beyond into the outside, without compromising any pedestrian circulation, mobility, and comfort. Businesses and circulation will be accompanied by resting areas where seating and green infrastructure like trees and planters exists to provide an overall experience of the space as a welcoming, comfortable space. In these corridors, depending on the scale of the street and the sidewalk dimensions, commercial activities can be located on opposite sides of the circulation on the sidewalk, and can even take over spaces like parking and loading zones, like you see on the image on the far right. Next one, please. So you might be thinking, so what makes a commercial corridor successful? Most vibrant commercial corridors offer a welcoming, safe, and authentic experience to patrons and visitors. The streetscape incorporates elements like trees and lighting to guarantee comfort and support commercial activity at different levels, with street vendors, open storefronts, so on and so forth. And then local culture, art, and identity are present and tangible within the space. Next one, please. So I want to share with you all some key design principles. These are, again, not comprehensive. It's not everything that could be part of a successful commercial corridor, but these are ones to keep in mind when thinking or rethinking what a corridor is. First, a corridor should be designed as an equitable and inclusive public space where everyone is welcome and comfortable. The street serves the needs of different and diverse users, but particularly focuses on pedestrians. Second, a street or a commercial corridor is a safe space for all, especially the most vulnerable. So prioritizing well-lit and hazard-free spaces is key. Third, healthy environments should be part of our rethinking of commercial corridors. That means supporting multiple lifestyle choices and implementing strategies to improve air quality, water quality, and overall life quality. Commercial corridors, especially, are multidimensional public spaces, which means that people experience them with all their senses and at different times. They play a big role in the public life of cities and should be designed as places for cultural expression, social interactions, and celebration in public life. Corridors are also ecosystems that integrate green infrastructure, commercial activity, and mobility. Authentic corridors enhance and support the local community historical and cultural context and provide residents and visitors with the space to reintroduce social functions like gathering, assembly, and recreation. Great streetscape creates environments that entice people to stay and spend time in the street, generating revenue for local businesses. As for design, the streets change, users change, and corridors should feel free to change and try new things. Slide, please. So how can a community-led organization like BEADS and development organizations and small businesses leverage those design principles to boost commerce and vibrancy in their communities? Slide. Here is a short list of tools that you can consider when improving your commercial corridors. Activate your facades and storefronts. Think about how connecting the indoor and outdoor spaces could work for you. Improve the corridor's landscape and appearance with trees, planters, lighting. Consider implementing water fountains, seating. You still hear me? Okay, awesome, yeah. Consider implementing water fountain seating and weather protection elements to guarantee people's comfort. Don't lose sight of signage and wayfinding along the public space. Offer businesses dedicated spaces to host commercial activities and seating areas that will draw visitors' attention. Guarantee access to storage, power, water, and waste management. And use your knowledge of hours of operation and schedules in your favor. You can use these tools in multiple ways. You don't need to use them all at the same time. Like Joseph mentioned, no one here is part of DOT, so you might not be able to implement all of these principles and tools at once, but you can start with one and use it creatively. So for the next part, I'm just going to share some examples of what this could look like, keeping a low-cost, high-maintenance approach, high-impact approach. Slide, please. So first, you can start by rethinking a business facade. This example right here shows a vegan sandwich shop in Madrid that decided to use a lamp, yellow paint, duct tape, and low-cost ornaments like the pineapples that you see up front to create an installation. They capitalize on creating a colorful installation that offer patrons and visitors an experience that they could immortalize on photos. So they even included a spot across the street is a pedestrian alley where they mark the place where people could stand to take the best photo of the facade, and then create a hashtag for social media to bring about visibility to the shop. Next one, please. You can also showcase local art and artists. These are examples of temporary installations and murals in Ontario, Canada, and Washington Heights, New York City. Think about local art as an anchor activity that draws visitors to your neighborhood and encourages patrons to spend time in the area. You can start as small as a single mural or art activation and grow from there. The example in Canada actually started as a single local art activation on the Hamilton neighborhood and has now become an annual arts festival that brings in thousands of people to the neighborhood. Next one, please. You can also use light and color to encourage extended use of the corridor as a public space. Here are 3 different examples that range from more permanent to more temporary. The example on the left is actually in Quito, Ecuador, where the municipality used a light installation to improve safety in a traditional downtown pedestrian street. These, in turn, brought visitors in the evenings and after hours and created a market opportunity for small coffee shops. The example in the middle is in Philly. They decided to highlight an auto shop facade in an alley, bringing attention to the street at night, which improved the perception of safety for pedestrians that were using nearby businesses and shops at night. The last example here is an installation in Madrid, again, that was designed to lead up unused storefronts nearby pharmacies. Their goal was to create awareness around the empty spaces and the closed storefronts, and their proximity to pharmacies, which are highly used and open 24 hours stores. So it was a combination of bringing awareness and also creating a safe space for patrons. Next one, please. So you can also experiment with creative wayfinding and neighborhood branding. I know you'll hear more about what that could look like for community-based organizations in the next part of this presentation and the workshop, but I will say you can start by considering signage, color, iconography as vehicles to share the corridor's unique qualities and the local businesses' identities. So again, this can take many, many shapes and forms, and you'll hear more about it, but creating something that draws attention into the corridor will be a place to start. Next one, please. So thinking on a slightly larger scale, commercial corridors are often linked to public plazas, squares, or parks at different sizes. You can leverage these public spaces to encourage residents and visitors to gather and spend more time in the area. This example right here use tactical landscaping and DIY elements like crochet, trees, scarves, temporary seating, in color and paint to create a welcoming community space that invited people to gather and spend time outside. Became a place where people who were shopping in nearby stores could bring their lunch or snack and just hang out. And again, the goal is to have them stay as long as possible in the area. Next one, please. There are also tactical temporary interventions that could be a little bit more time-consuming and expensive if you want to think about it. But it's another option is to leverage city-led initiatives like open streets, open restaurants, and the use of parklets. Some of you might be familiar with this. So these structures can be used for different purposes and can be designed to different degrees. Simple and easy to implement examples include the use of temporary barriers like planters, and paint on the ground to just create the idea of an extended pedestrian usable space onto parking spaces on the street. And more expensive and time-consuming examples could be structures like the one that you see on the image in Richmond, where community let members co-design and build this honeycomb structure to support a local juice shop. The advantages of the latter example, I think, is that while co-designing with community members and co-building not only creates this space of to support for the small business, but it also increases creative capacity within the community. Next one, please. So there are also tactical temporary interventions that are low cost and basically consists of quick demonstrations of possibilities. What could it be? In commercial corridors, these interventions can create new kinds of spaces for people to gather and for artists to show their art. These interventions don't need to be expensive or complicated. This example in Birch Street in Boston shows how using, again, duct tape, geometry, and milk crates, the white ones you see there, community members and merchants improve the visitors' experience and offer their patrons an opportunity to stay longer and shop more. These interventions can also be the starting point for permanent transformations if that's your ultimate goal. And it could just introduce to the community a participatory urban design approach. They serve, like I mentioned, as a quick demonstration of what the space could look like, and without, having a big upfront investment into it. It can also be the perfect scenario for participatory planning and inclusive design from the get-go, and not just falling into a feedback loop, but actually providing input on the design and what you want to see in the space. Next one, please. On an even bigger scale, BEADs and CBDOs can consider planning and hosting pop-up markets to activate corridors and plazas in their neighborhood, which could provide novelty for visitors and bring about vibrancy to the community. This is an example in Seattle, where they use containers to create kiosks for small business vendors and merchants that use the spaces on a rotating basis. Local artists were commissioned to create the art that you see on the sides, and merchants associations co-curated a list of small businesses that will use the kiosk. The containers sit along a promenade, inviting pedestrians that were using the public space to shop while making use of the space and promenading. It's definitely a more expensive and more, I want to say, thought of initiative they have for kiosks. But again, the goal is to just give you examples. You can start as small as you need or go big. Next one, please. So I want to say last, but definitely not least, like I said, this is not a comprehensive list. You can definitely think of new ways to approach commercial corridor revitalization. But I would say just remember to dream big, even if you start small. It is okay to have a long-term project or plan and to take as much time as you need to build capacity, gather funds, and create the conditions necessary for a big transformation. This example here is Librería Barco de Papel in Jackson Heights, Queens. They have been working with Van Alen and design professionals in a comprehensive project to improve their interior space, their facade, and their visibility within their community. They started in 2021 as small businesses started reopening after the worst of the pandemic. Barco de Papel worked with designers through Van Alen and DOT to implement a seating area right in front of their storefront, taking over a parking space. So basically creating a parklet with barriers like the planters you see there. The designers in Barco work on simple schemes that will help them understand how they could accommodate programming and maximize the space between the storefront and the parklets. So they have hosted author readings and other cultural events, making use of the public space. You see in the photos at the bottom, which are from last year, the seating area remains in place and usable. Next one, please. Their next step in 2022 was to work with an architecture firm to redesign the facade and interior space. Their goal was to open the facade to expand their interior activities as much as possible onto the public space. And so the project includes furniture and other movable elements that maximize the use of the exterior space while providing much needed storage for a bookstore. The project is ambitious, to say the least, and the bookstore, that is mostly run by volunteers, have been working on building their own capacity in preparation for a fundraising campaign to make this dream come true. This included, in 2024, working with a graphic design and branding firm to update their brand identity and website, and to create communication assets that increase their visibility and social media presence, again, in preparation for their fundraising campaign. So again, the picture that you see at the bottom right, it's their current facade. They have been able to incorporate their new brand identity. And you see the parklet as well. So small steps towards their final goal. So these are just some examples of how to use the design principles and tools to improve the experience of people in commercial corridors and businesses. The most important thing, like I said, to remember is that you can start small and still make an impact. So again, take these tools and these examples and use them creatively in your own neighborhoods and cultures. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. And again, everyone, if you have some questions that you're already thinking about for Diana, feel free to start putting them in the chat. That way, when we make it to the end of the presentation, we will read out all those questions for you as well. And Pratik, if you can go to the next slide, I'll introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Rosa Chang with Gotham Park. Rosa has been a downtown resident for over 25 years and a community advocate with a focus on public space, youth, education, and community cohesiveness. As co-founder and president of Gotham Park, Rosa hopes to unlock a singular space where we can all share, learn, grow, and thrive. These passions are reflected in her membership in Manhattan's Community Board 1 in Youth and Education as co-chair, Waterfront Parks, Cultural and Land Use, Zoning and Economic Development Committees. She's a member of the Climate Coalition of Lower Manhattan, and with Gotham Park's founding, opening, and continued growth, Rosa's working to turn an infrastructural burden into a community hub that connects our diverse neighborhoods and people. The Alen Institute had the pleasure of partnering with Rosa and Gotham Park on our most recent iteration of the Design Sprints program, but you'll hear more about that from Rosa shortly.
Thank you so much, Joseph, and thank you so much, SBS and Van Alen Institute. Hi, everyone. My name is Rosa Chang, as Joseph just mentioned, with Gotham Park, which is a 4-year-old grassroots nonprofit opening, revitalizing, and reactivating the forgotten spaces beneath the Manhattan side of the iconic Brooklyn Bridge. And just for context, if we were a human, we're sort of like a tween, not a newborn, like Adam's really scrumptious little baby. Absolutely not an adult, but still totally in the super young stages where we're still stabilizing and growing into what we hope to become. And so through advocacy and stewardship, we are working with the city to convert long fenced off, dark and desolate multi-block spaces beneath enormous public infrastructure, which is, the Brooklyn Bridge, to create a new community-led space. We are grassroots, we all live around here, and we want to create a world-class public space that's going to nurture community connection and resilience, unlocking not only the actual physical open space, but also joy, discovery, and wonder. Next slide, please. It took us about 2 years to open the first acre. And in year 3, this is a photo of year 3, we opened another 0.3 acres. And this year we're going to be opening another 3 acres. So in year 4, we are going to be 4 acres large, and we're really excited about that. But all this is to say that we are crazy busy and we run on a shoestring budget. and we are all overworked and exhausted. We are a skeleton team. We are running our hearts out to turn this vision into reality. And none of us are professional graphic maestros. Does any of this sound familiar to you all? And next slide, please. But our dreams are big. I mean, we are anchored by no less than the iconic Brooklyn Bridge. So, but oftentimes, you know, big dreams on small budgets are really hard to reconcile. And so that is why we were so deliriously excited, honestly, to be accepted into the Van Alen Institute's Design Sprints program, because it allowed us to take an enormous leap forward. Next slide, please. Effective wayfinding in public space is crucial to the success of a long and skinny multi-block project like ours. So we originally approached Van Alen with a very big request to do a whole wayfinding project for us. But apparently such an endeavor might have been impossible in the tight time frame of the design sprints. But we also realized that we didn't have a logo that we wanted to put on the wayfinding in the first place. So with Joseph's guidance, that easily translated into, let's focus on the smaller discrete scope that we need as an essential ingredient to allow us to eventually get to the larger wayfinding component, which we absolutely still need. Next, please. Because one of our primary goals is actually to harness and direct the 10 million annual visitors to the Brooklyn Bridge and drive their foot traffic and their wallets into our local community small businesses. We needed an instant, impactful, cohesive brand to be not only the backbone of our wayfinding plan, but also the anchor to all our communications with our diverse neighborhood and stakeholders. Next, please. Our community is seriously diverse. Our next door neighbors run the gamut from NYCHA's Alfred E. Smith houses and our 4 Title I high schools with 2,000 students inside the Murray Bertram campus, to the Financial District, the South Street Seaport Historic District, FIDI and Tribeca, and 20% of our population are seniors and 20% are youth. You know, we're 64% BIPOC and 47% foreign born. And NYPD headquarters and many city and federal offices are also our next door neighbors, as is Pace University with their 6,000 students. You know, the Brooklyn Bridge itself not only runs through the entire site, but is one of New York City's most popular tourist destinations, of course. And last, but certainly not least, we are home to the most significant original streetscape spot in the entire planet. I like to think, the Brooklyn Banks, which is memorializing countless videos and even Tony Hawk's Pro Skater video game, but was permanently closed in 2010. We needed a brand identity that was going to translate to all our community stakeholders, which is a hard ask from one logo. We needed a team that actually got us in all of our glorious and complicated diversity. Next, please. We knew of only one firm that we wanted to be our design partner on all of this, which is Pentagram. Pentagram is legendary in the graphic design world, and we didn't know anyone there. And frankly, they are known, I hope they're not here. They're known for being a little expensive, but justifiably so, because their work is iconic. And so we had caviar taste on a tap water budget. But we also believe, frankly, that you know, dream big and then figure out a way to make it happen, right? So next, please. We did have a logo, but it was made by me at 3 a.m., you know, in a rush, because we needed to put something on our newly created website, which was also built by me, probably also at 3 a.m. And, you know, so you sort of get the idea. It was originally created when we had a different name, which was Brooklyn Bridge Manhattan, but that was like super long and mouthy. And so we dropped that and went to Gotham Park, which is a lot easier, but you can see like a little BB and an M in there. Honestly, when we changed our name, we just didn't have the time to be able to like do a whole other logo. And so we just sort of like subbed out the words and then, went onwards and upwards. So we needed something better and more effective and different. And so next slide, please. As we grew in success as an org, we needed something that was going to honestly represent us for the next 150 years. So with the stewardship of Van Alen Institute and the dedication and creativity of Pentagram, we were able to create a brand and logo. Okay, so you might notice that there's actually 8 logos, so we sort of sweet talk them into that. And a lot of different branding scenarios that we are so excited to use on the site, at events, and in our various communications, including social media, which is all super cohesive. Next slide, please. The custom font has a lot of flexibility and is tied to the physical elements of what makes our space, the masonry of the Brooklyn Bridge and the red brick that flows beneath it. It is timeless and simple. We are integrating it into everything that we put out, from the basics of communication, including our email, website, business cards, tablecloths for our community events, to branded gear, including hats, t-shirts, and skateboards. I don't know if you guys can see this actually, but we just got this delivered this weekend. So it's a skateboard. We are so excited to have something that's like an easily recognizable brand that's critical to our identity out in the world. We also have some really specific reasons to brand our Gotham Park team members, which is that our space sits inside the Civic Center security zone, which is an area of Lower Manhattan that has been closed off since 9/11 to private vehicular traffic. And our direct next door neighbor is NYPD headquarters. So we're lugging gear and opening fire hydrants and using large tools on the daily. So NYPD needs to know, as our team gets bigger, who we are and that we are legitimately doing work there. Just like they have a uniform, we also need a uniform so that we are instantly recognizable. And because we are at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge, the 10 million annual tourists also need to recognize us and to know that we can help direct them to whatever they are looking for in the neighborhood, be it a place to eat or their next stop. It's okay to stop and ask us for directions and ask us for help, because they don't need to then spend 5 minutes trying to decipher Google Maps. The gear helps us to be instantly identifiable neighborhood ambassadors, while also helping us to drive economic activity to our neighborhood businesses. So we have been enormously thankful to Pentagram and to Van Alen Institute for including us in their Design Sprints program. This has really allowed us to flex our creative muscle in a very short amount of time, and to provide something that literally takes us 5 steps forward in record time. So we are so thankful. And honestly, they have continued to be supportive of us post the Design Sprints engagement, which is one of the reasons why you see me here today. And they are consummate professionals. So what that translates into concretely is like, this isn't their first rodeo. Even if it's your one and only rodeo, you are in excellent hands. And when it comes to your own brand, just think about the who you are trying to reach and the why you are trying to reach them. And that automatically leads you to the what that you are all going to create that's going to best serve you going forward. Thank you. And happy adventures in branding.
Thank you so much, Rosa. If we ever need to film a Van Alen commercial, I will call you. You at the top of my list.
Thank
I
you.
wanted to just say that something that was missing in your presentation is that for all of you sitting here today, Rosa has just shown like how much work they do. They are a team of like 2, maybe 3, but they're a very small and mighty team. So even though you're seeing all this beautiful branding, yeah, they do a lot. And also, just a shameless pitch here, we aren't doing design sprints right now because we're doing building creative capacity. But just so you all know, unless it becomes something different, in the summer, you should all look out for, if you have some idea, another design sprints open call at Van Alen. So if you all have an idea of any sorts, just keep an eye out for a design sprint call from Van Alen because we're always seeking new and returning community partners. I think we're going to transition over to our activity. So we're going to pause the recording so that everyone can feel comfortable sharing during the activity. And then we'll take our break and then come back with. Let's go to the next slide, Pratik. All right, you've already met him, but I'm going to do a proper introduction for our facilitator and next speaker, BD Feliz. BD Feliz has over a decade of experience. He's a Dominican-born, Bronx-raised designer, researcher, and artist. BD Feliz founded his own design studio by his same name to address, through design, the many complex problems that face local underrepresented communities in New York City and around the world. BD Feliz creates value for clients in the public and private sectors through human-centered integrated design, and leverages a network of visionaries ready to collaborate on projects that push communities forward. His proven track record of success demonstrates his commitment to advancing his clients' work, whether in education, climate justice, or local government. The Van Alen Institute has had the pleasure of working with BD Feliz on several programs, including but not limited to 2 different design sprints projects in 2024 alone.
Great. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Joseph. A big thank you to the Van Alen team, to everyone that's here listening, ready to really push their work forward. Thank you for being here. This is great. It means a lot for y'all to be here and listening and learning and also sharing ideas and connecting. I think that's very important when it comes to community and as relates to design. Thank you also as well to the SBS team, all of the great folks there. It's been a pleasure getting to know y'all a bit more and also just bringing us all together. We can go to the next slide, but I'll just say briefly, before we took our break, we had a chance to learn a bit about branding and a brand and how it can be more than just a name or a logo. A person can be a brand, a neighborhood can be branded, and so on. So I want to spend a bit of time to talk a bit about tools that our organizations can leverage to accelerate or improve on the work that many of us are already doing. But first, I'd like to share a bit about myself and why I think that access to design and design tools matters. So as the big headline there says, design is for everyone. So I go by BD. As Joseph had mentioned, I'm a Bronx-based designer, design strategist, storyteller, researcher, and sometimes more. When I'm not traveling to someplace new, I'm working with organizations and people who want to make a difference, through harnessing the power of design for social good. Although I've created value through design for over a decade, I'd say that my relationship with design goes back further. Many of you remember a time before social networks and TikTok tutorials when something like graphic design or web development or branding were things left to big advertising agencies. A time where a lot of traditional tools used to solve creative problems were not as accessible, when information was not as accessible. Well, let's just say I was one of those kids that learned an important lesson, which is, I'm going to borrow this off of Deanna from earlier. Dream big while starting small. So I learned that at an early age, that design isn't just about software and formal degrees. It's about really problem solving and thinking outside the box. No place has taught me that more than the Bronx. That and my Dominican roots have taught me to work essentially with any tools that are available to get to where I need to get to. Before design software, it was a marker and a poster from the dollar store. And really just working with anything that's available. So next slide, please. Okay, so why does accessible design matter? Accessibility, access to design tools, why does it matter? To me personally, it's a goal to help as many organizations and people become design-minded. Half of that work is about showing folks in our community that design doesn't have to be this overly complicated thing with expensive tools that we just don't have the budget for. In reality, it's often about developing a strategy to a problem and leveraging anything that's accessible or available. These images here that you're seeing are posters that I helped to design for Equality for Flatbush through the first cohort of the Design Sprints program with Van Alen. They needed help essentially reaching more folks in the community for their rapid responders program. And so we were trying to find the fun way to connect to community, but still have that attitude of what the neighborhood is and what the organization represents. And we spent a bit of time working on like taglines and figuring out what cool ways to, to basically invite people over without it having to be this overly this thing that they felt that didn't represent them. So, we came up together with like one of these ads: leading with love builds community trust. And there's the other one that says calmness and kindness de-escalates violence. And the example that's shown there shows how it could be a beautiful image in color if the budget permits, but if not, it can also be something that's black and white. And I think we tend to sometimes think that an image or a poster that's printed in black and white doesn't have to be beautiful, but I will demonstrate towards the end of this how that can actually be used. And it all really boils down to getting creative about and how we can, communicate what we want to communicate. So next slide, please. Okay, so the first tool that I would like to recommend or share, which is not seen often as a tool, right? Like I'm going to be sharing software, I'm going to be sharing websites and things that, y'all can use to whether it's branding or overall just in your organization's like communication deck building. But the first thing that I just do want to share is that like design really starts with research, right? It's about defining the landscape, understanding, what are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges as an organization. And this can apply to the organization as a whole. It can apply to a specific project. It's just on different levels, but it's really defining the landscape. We need to understand like where we stand, where we are, right? So from that, we gain an understanding. What does the community think about our organization? Is the community receiving the information we're sharing, right? Like meeting your community where they're at. So if it's certain neighborhoods might be heavily relying on social media, other neighborhoods might not. It all really depends on the neighborhood and, really the folks in the area, really. And also it's very important to think about like how do people relate to us as an organization? Like is the way that we communicate a way that they feel is like inviting, that they feel that they're able to share and participate, or do we just like do events here and there, right? So that's important to understand. And then the third aspect of that is planning for change. So will changing our font improve communication? Maybe maybe our font is cartoony, for example, and we need to make it in a way that builds trust, that people feel like the colors represent something that makes us feel welcome. And so those are things that we think about as we start from like defining the landscape and then understanding like, where we exist within community. Next slide, please. Okay. So as far as resources available and things that are accessible, right? Like accessibility is what it's about. And we don't always have like an expensive firm or designer around. But little things sometimes make a big difference, right? It's about dreaming big, but starting small, right? So the first resource I want to share is open source fonts. Oftentimes we think we need to license these expensive fonts and all of this thing. Well, it's very different now than it was before. So Google has Google Fonts, which any fonts that you use on that site are trustworthy. You can download them, and they're basically like royalty free. Like there are things you can use. You won't have to worry about copyright issues, and you can even use them on your logo. So that's definitely a resource I would like to share. There's also the League of Movable Type, which is the original like open source font foundry. So anything from there you can download, and they also allow you to see examples of how even different text that you input will look. And so that's something that is there. I'm not sure if I'm seeing the comments here. No. All right. So can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, this is an example of how like fonts in branding can work, right? This was a client of mine's, Rematriation RD, which is just an organization that's really about reconnecting Dominicans across the diaspora back to home and having it be a thing where we want to invest and we want to get involved with things there, and feel that relationship. And one of their goals was really to have something, to have a typography and font that felt warm and it felt welcoming and it felt a little bit of fun, but not like too cartoony. So, using Google Fonts, we found Cot Chasen, which is a font that I felt represented those things. And as you can see in the example there of how something like that does kind of give a different feeling to materials. If you see on the right there, there's essentially like a component of their website which uses that, and just the different different font weights create a bit of a hierarchy for how information is absorbed, and that's like helpful. And that's something that y'all can all do literally by just going on like one of these sites and getting a font. And maybe, not saying everyone needs it, but it's a resource. Yeah, so let's go to the next one, please. Color palettes also another great way, right? Like using color. There's a tool called Coolers, right? It's a website, and what it allows you to do is it allows you to essentially create palettes for your brand or project. You can you can have it auto generate like just a random set of colors and then think about how you relate to that, or you can upload an image and from that have it detect colors in that image, and then they have also a palette visualizer which will show you like how that translates to like icons and illustrations and communication material in general. They have a lot more like tools than that, to be honest with you, but I will definitely recommend you like check out the site. But this is my go-to place when it comes to like figuring out colors for a project or for like branding. And if you can go to the next slide, I will show you an example, right? Like this was a project. This was the second cohort of design sprints last year with the James Baldwin Outdoor Learning Center, where the goal was really to make a statement through color. And so what we did is, or what I did was, I went to one of their outdoor markets, and I said, let me bring my camera and take some photos, just so we have some content. And I was looking around at the different types of flowers and things that they had in the garden, and I said, oh, this flower looks beautiful, and it's something that has a relationship to the garden and the work that they do. So I took a picture of it, and that's something I then uploaded to like Coolers, and was able to get this like kind of purple. Like, yeah, there was a bit of tweaking as well, but like essentially like the color, this purple color, is directly from this flower that I saw at the garden, and I felt like represents work that they do. So these are like fun ways that you can like make a statement through color, and then literally bring your community into your branding through just the things that you see around. Like I live in the Bronx, so there's a lot of different things that are unique to the space here, and I think we don't tend to think about color as a thing, but like there are specific, you kind of will know where you are based off of the colors, literally. And I think there's a book about that as well, but let's go to the next slide. Accessible images as well. I'm going to show you some examples in a bit, but first I'll share the tools, right? So there's Unsplash is a great resource for, okay, so we're running tight on time, so I'm going to try to speed through this. So it's a great resource for photography. If you need high quality photos and you don't necessarily have a photographer on hand, it's highly recommended there. Any image you use there, you don't have to worry about copyrights. Everything's free. It's community funded. Amazing resource. There's also nappy.co, which is great for images where you need to show, you need to be inclusive. In general, we should all just be inclusive, right? But it's a great resource for photos, specifically if you need like melanin essentially in your photos. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, these are examples of just a project that I use, and this is kind of like storytelling. In Cultured Co, they do a ton of work to bridge the gap between Dominicans and Haitians. There's a lot of conflict happening there between our communities, even though we're like family, right? But storytelling was a way that they wanted to, or was something they wanted to bring into their branding. And so we used Unsplash to find like images that we felt represented the work that they do, or that were literally taken in DR, right? So this like repository of photos is global, and it's just photographers that want to share photos for folks to have them. Next slide, please. Okay. Other low cost, I promise you we're almost done. Other low cost to no cost, like resources. Adobe Creative Cloud, this is kind of like the more of the well-known one. But some things that people don't realize about Adobe is that they have like artificial intelligence tools that you can use. They have a built-in QR generator, so you don't have to like look for random websites for like QR codes. And then also they have really good like mobile apps that you can use for editing. So you don't have to be like an expert on the software. You can just learn the app as well and like do things there. Canva is great for templates. I don't use it as much, but it is a resource, so I definitely want to share that. Creative Commons is like the go-to place for anything open source, like open source content. That not only photos, it could be music, music for your videos, right? Like it could be videos themselves. Like it's a great resource, so definitely would recommend that. Icon Finder is great for icons, so that if you do a poster, you can have the actual icon and high quality of like whatever, whether it's Instagram or what have you. And then also just don't sleep on like social networking apps. Like a lot of them have built-in editors that don't necessarily they work really well. And so yeah, I would recommend that. Next slide, please. Okay, we're almost at the end, I promise. A resource that I created that's going to be available to you, I believe is going to be shared, is these like "we're hiring" and "volunteer with us" signs. One thing that I notice a lot in my community and just throughout is that like when small businesses are hiring, they'll just like make a poster, like just like handwrite one or just put like a little paper and say like "we're hiring, call this number." And so I wanted to kind of just create a design that anyone could build upon, which is these simple posters here. You can draw whatever, doodle whatever on the side of that empty space. And it could also be something that's laminated, and like with a marker, you can write what the specific job is that you're hiring for, the position, and as well as rates and like how to apply, and like literally put that in the front of the business. So that's going to be available. I've made it like public domain, so like anyone can download and use. There's also a template file which will have like a version where you can edit the QR. So if you have like a website that people can apply, they can use that as well. Last slide. I think it's the last slide. Yeah. That being said, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Please feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any questions. Like, although like this is kind of what I do as a business, this is what I do on many levels. Like I'm someone that believes in accessible design. I'm someone that believes that communities should be able to leverage design to push forward. And so I'm always open. If you do have a question, you need to reach out, or if you want to talk to me about your project as well, like feel free to reach out. My information is there, and hopefully y'all will also be getting the those files that I made. And yeah, with that being said, I'm going to pass it on to Scott and Martha. I believe they're the next speakers. And thank you.
Thanks, BD. And yes, everyone, everything that has been shared with you will be made available. There will be a recording of this presentation. You will also have the slides as well as any materials that have been made available by BD. I'm going to pass it off to Scott. Can we go to the next slide, Pratik? Well, yeah, there you go. So Scott Kelly is a talented graphic designer who has supported Van Alen Institute and our community partners over the past few years. Not only has he lent his talents to supporting our own storefront activations, website, social media campaigns, and block parties, but he's helped our partner organizations such as the Gowanus Oversight Task Force and the Clemente Center with their projects. Scott is now continuing to support Van Alen, both as a consultant and one of the design advisors for our Building Creative Capacity program. He's joined by Martha Hall, a talented artist, illustrator, animator, and so much more. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Scott, our final presenter, who will better introduce Martha, and they'll take it away.
You can go to the next slide, Pratik. And yeah, like people are alluding to, I'll have a more robust version of this presentation available in the resources section with more information on the slides themselves. So before we talk about like what goes into making a storefront installation and what considerations you need to have, kind of go through a few reasons why you would want to do it in the first place. A main thing is that it is a kind of great place to reach new audiences. Okay, it's like an inherently broad audience that you're projecting out to, which also impacts, what you put up there. But it's a great way to kind of get people that might not otherwise, interact with your space. It kind of, for lack of a better word, forces them to engage in some way with whatever it is that you're hoping to project onto that canvas. It's also great. It's a way to talk to people or can do some sort of messaging when no one is in your storefront. So that's kind of left, left up there, and it doesn't have to be people within the space to kind of convey information about what goes on in the space or projects that are happening or what have you. But ideally, it's also an invitation to enter the space itself. You want a storefront that is kind of and inviting to people or kind of provokes a certain kind of person to enter your space and kind of seek out more information about whatever it is that you're putting on this in this frame. And so with that in mind, the storefront should really be the first step. So there's if the goal is to bring people into the space, you should have kind of a built-in choreography of what happens when someone does take that next step of entering into your space or seeking out more information. So this means either, knowing what to tell people, having materials to give them, or having kind of digital pathways that they can go to kind of seek out more information. Because if the display is effective enough that it makes people want to do that, you need to have a strategy for how that unfolds. And then a final thing that's actually not on here, but was brought to mind during Diana's presentation, is like the storefront's also a space. It's a large public-facing space that you have full autonomy over. So as soon as you leave the canvas of the storefront and go into the sidewalk or things like that, you start having to deal with city agencies and other entities that really complicate matters. But the storefront is really kind of yours to work with to a much greater degree, and so that you shouldn't overlook that flexibility that comes with that. So next slide. So here is an example of a display we worked on with Van Alen, and that Martha will also speak about a bit. So this was kind of the one on the right here. The more colorful bit is an installation that's about CSO, so combined sewer overflow in the Gowanus Canal, and informing people about the issue and also like what they can do to mitigate its effects in the neighborhood. So we go from this storefront to next slide. And this is kind of an example of an expansion of how the storefront becomes, the branding of the storefront, the graphics, the visuals are then expanded to this light that is kind of the crux of the program, which starts changing colors when there is a CSO event that's happening, but also having, flyers, stickers with QR codes, having these things in the space so that if someone comes in, they have kind of a takeaway and they can bring elements of the storefront back with them. So yeah, having that infrastructure in place is really key if you're trying to create a more kind of immersive experience for somebody with a storefront installation. Next slide. So design considerations, what goes into it? These are kind of some, I don't know, fundamental pillars of what would inform what your display looks like. So if materials, scale, how does it work in different lighting conditions? So that's a key one to consider. If something does it matter? Does it have to be visible at night? If so, do you have a lighting plan in place? How clear of a kind of a background is your office? Do you have big glass windows that need to be like blocked out, or is that good to kind of put more transparent graphics over? And then external collaboration. So are you enlisting artists like we did for the Gowanus program, or are you trying to create an interactive display that kind of invites passerbys to engage with it, like in a more visual way? People do kind of ad hoc surveying and things like that through stickers. There's ways to kind of create an experience that's evolving over time. And external collaboration is like a great way to bring in new audiences, and working with artists is also really helpful to kind of convey a different kind of voice with your messaging. Next slide. Yeah, so just as a cost reference before we get into how that informs the design. So on the left, you see a storefront at a display at the Van Alen offices from 2021. That was mostly focused on the massive rezoning that was happening in Gowanus and kind of keeping locals informed about that process and their ability to engage with it. And then on the right, you have a much more expensive installation that we did the aforementioned CSO project. So the one on the left is quite a bit cheaper. Some of the cost savings come in through the deployment of paper. So vinyl is generally going to be a fairly expensive process because you need to, you need to work extensively with outside. You need to bring in outside expertise to both print it and install it, and so that comes with its own kind of pricing challenges. So what we did on the first one there is we cut into some of that by mixing vinyl with paper. So you see large paper posters that were printed in a local print shop. And then what you see here on these doorways, this community info, is a vinyl frame that is then filled on a rotating basis with things that are just printed in-house. So that's a great way to kind of cut into costs. Not everything needs to be printed in kind of the most expensive materials. But the having a frame, having the vinyl there in place is kind of a helpful elevating factor in the display. So learning kind of how to be tactical about the mix and matching of the materials is I think really helpful, and that they can really play off each other in an effective way. So on the right here, we have like a full vinyl display, which is eye-catching, but also is costly. Printing in these bright colors, that's a cost escalator. One switch we made for this later vinyl installation is we changed the heading from this more on the left here, this more kind of graphic visual one that has this canal weaving through Gowanus and things like that, and that ties into the visuals throughout the rest of the display. Versus the one on the right is a lot more generic and is conducive to rotating displays in. So whenever this one gets replaced, that header on the top can just stay there, and it's not an extra cost that's added to future installation displays. Next. Again, so this is an example of how you can use a cheap material like paper, colored paper, to kind of create an elevated effect. So printing just in black ink on colored paper, or doing this kind of tiling effect, filling up a whole window, is a great kind of in-house method that is still presents as kind of an elevated outward-facing visual device. Next. Again, so this is, you see on the right here more clearly, this kind of community info frame here. So that was installed with vinyl, but it's basically just kind of a platform on which we can post things that are just printed in-house. But having that kind of that foundation of the vinyl, of the frame, just makes it kind of feel a little more professional and a little more dynamic visually. And there you get a better look at like the paper posters that are coexisting with the vinyl. Next. Scale. So scale is super important because people are going to be engaging with the work at various degrees of distance. You want something that has large enough elements that someone walking across the street would still glean some degree of information from, but you also need a kind of a density of information that rewards people who want to come over and actually engage with it to a higher degree. So on the Gowanus one, like we had, people that would walk by, maybe scan a QR code or see the header and cross the street and come over. But then once they had crossed the street, there was enough information there that if they were, curious or if they were inclined, they could, that their approach was rewarded with kind of gaining access to more information. So it was able to straddle a line where people would walk by for 10 seconds. But at the same time, it was dense enough that like local classrooms were using it as a teaching device to inform their students about CSO and pollution in the Gowanus Canal. So the kind of the more grace with which your display can straddle various degrees of time commitments, the more effective it will be. And scale is kind of the biggest tool for doing that. So I think that is it. Yeah, so I'll hand it over to Martha, and like I said, I'll have the resources, a more robust presentation that's available for people to peruse. So Martha Hall, she worked with us on that CSO display. She's a Queens-based freelance illustrator, animator, and printmaker. In addition to her creative practice, she serves as a business development manager at Ape Studio, a New York-based playscape design firm. Her recent projects include educational music video animations for Nearpod, a student engagement platform, and illustrations for the updated Urban Bikeway Design Guide by the National Association of City Transportation Officials. And she's going to give kind of the artist perspective of what it was like working as a kind of an expert within a larger storefront display.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I really enjoyed this project. We started it in about August 2022. And right off the bat, there was a really clear deadline and timeline to work with, which is always helpful. So we started with these initial sketches of kind of these ideas and elements that were based on the information that I was provided. That took about 2 weeks. And then for the final deliverables, it was about a 4-week duration. And for the deliverables, these were 1-color or 2-color illustrations that were vector files that they could be printed on vinyl. And lots of kind of ideation came out of this. I really appreciated that Van Alen came to me with clear goals and a lot of background information. And then another consideration was these kind of scope of work for pricing. At the time, they were still kind of trying to figure out what were the layouts, how much illustration would they need, where would the text take place. So that was helpful to kind of have these 3 different options to work with. You could go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, project direction is really important when you're starting, having really clear goals, ideas of how the community is going to engage with this, whether you're trying to enhance foot traffic and so on. And then I find as an artist that it's so helpful to have background knowledge on the topic. So I was provided a lot of information on the Gowanus project and how combined sewer overflow worked. I had previously been, had no information about it. It was great to learn. And then another really important thing is having strong project owners. I was really lucky to work with Andrew and Scott, who had really clear vision and were able to very adequately articulate kind of the style that they wanted, the ultimate goals, and so on. So starting with a strong art direction is really helpful. You might not have the visual style established. Would the artist need to work on this? And how would the artist that you're working with, their style interact with, let's say, the brand that you already have associated with your organization? So I think choosing the right artist is also important in making sure that you end up with the end goal that you wanted. So in this process, I think it's really helpful to provide visual references to work with. Even a mood board or a Pinterest board is very helpful for artists. And then realistic timelines. Making art takes time and you want to have the best end goal possible. So I think that having quick turnarounds for feedback are really important because you also end up saving money in the long run. The more iterations that an artist has to do, the more they typically bill. So really being able to concisely communicate what you like and what you don't like is really important. And then, of course, maintaining clear communication. This is a project and you need a good project manager associated with it. Next slide, please. So this is just kind of information on some of feedback and revisions that I received. So being specific and detailed is really important. Scott had great feedback about, I had never really worked with vinyl printing. So learning that some of my lines were going to be too fine for printing was very helpful in just establishing the rest of the deliverables. Again, having a point person is very important who can really adequately communicate this. And I'd say that obviously a lot of community members are usually going to be connected to this and have opinions and information they'd like to provide, but having one person who can really funnel it and clearly communicate it is really important. And again, proper feedback saves you time and money. Next slide, please. So then we kind of worked on this draft layout. We had 3 previous layouts, and then this was kind of narrowing the focus. We decided to have this top 4-panel horizontal illustration that would really draw in your eye. And so it was interesting to kind of think large spatially in the scale, like Scott mentioned. So then after that, we kind of did a comprehensive first draft. They put in some of the spot illustrations and diagrams that I had done. And then we just kind of refined it from there. Next slide, please. These are some of the final illustrations that I worked with, and then Scott ended up putting color on them, which I found made them much more dynamic. And I would kind of provide different iterations of these ideas. We didn't want people swimming in the Gowanus Canal or fishing, and how can I most adequately show that through iconography and illustration. And I think it's really good to have fun in these projects. Just the pigeon on the toilet paper, I love that was used for kind of this icon for the whole project. It's fun, it's playful, and I think it speaks to a community as a whole, no matter the age group. Next slide, please. And this kind of just shows my initial diagrams and then their final iterations. So just to round it up, I'd say that having clear goals, a clear idea of what you want, choosing the right artist is important, and also realizing that this is a collaboration with an artist. You can have a clear end goal, but artists will always have interpretations, and I think that's what makes it special. And again, this detailed notes and feedback really saves you time, and I think leads to a really great end goal. And that's it.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Scott. And I see you have your contact information there, which is great. We don't have very much time left, but we do have a little bit of time for Q&A. I don't have questions in the chat, but I wanted to see if anyone with questions wanted to raise their Zoom hand and ask questions of any of the presenters. I see no Zoom hands. Anyone with questions, you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, if I may, Al Valentin over at the Graham Avenue Business Improvement District. This was really very helpful. Martha and everyone, thank you for this. When we think about the work that we do on small but busy retail districts, retail corridors, it's really difficult to incorporate a lot of the things, especially some of the bigger budget things that are typically done. And I'm curious as to work that has been done, again, on smaller but busier districts or corridors where there are no green spaces, no plazas, right? So that's one of the things that are on my mind. And so with that, basically my ask is this: if I could, I wanted to confirm that the presenters are available for quick chats to kind of get my thinking and clarification straight on some of the challenges that that we're experiencing here in my district. And that's the question, really.
Yeah, I think all the folks that put their contact info on there definitely, but I'll let everyone else also speak for themselves. I know BD, Scott, Martha had their contact info on there. Rosa's contact info is publicly available, and Deanna is in Seattle. But if Deanna, would you like to be available for a chat?
Yeah, happy to. Please feel free to share my email, and we can set up a time for a quick chat. And Valentin, yeah, happy to share more about what can be done in smaller corridors that don't really have public spaces like plazas, squares, or parks nearby. I will just say, like, we can discuss more in detail the Boston example that I share, where they literally use the street to create a plaza. But yeah.
Thank you.
Also, stay tuned for building creative capacity. I think Grand Street Bid is one of the organizations that we're working with. So very similar. I don't think there's a lot of green space on Grand Street, so stay tuned to see how that works out there. And I also want to address that I answered with my email, so that's also there as well. Kenneth asked, how can I get Van Alen to visit Brooklyn's Flatbush Junction? Just email me at my Van Alen email, and maybe we can set something up. Just let me know what your ideas are. We have 3 minutes left. Are there any other questions?
Hey, Joseph, could you talk a little bit about the design sprints? You mentioned, I think, a new iteration of that or a new role. Exactly what is that?
Yes, so the Design Sprints program is a program we run at Van Alen where we partner with community-based organizations. Typically, we select 5 for building creative capacity. That was different. We selected 3. We don't have as much of a focus with building creative capacity. It was specific to storefront activations. For design sprints, we're really looking for projects that are implementable with a small budget, and we assign 8 weeks. So it has to be something quick, something that can get off the ground. So think of building a building that wouldn't really fall under the design sprints timeline, but a new website could, a small wayfinding strategy could, some signage could. I will drop the Design Sprints website in the chat so you could learn a little bit more, because I think it's always helpful to see what the Design Sprints outcomes could look like. But yeah, it's really the short-term program that we run at Van Alen, where we partner with community organizations and then give them the design support and the seed funding that tends to look like a very fast-paced program with graphic designers, architects, engineers, really you name it. And we run it twice a year, but this year, because of building creative capacity, so far it seems like we're running it only once, because we're running building creative capacity in its place.
Thank you.
And I think we are at noon, just about, so I don't think we have any more time for any further questions. I want to very quickly thank all of the presenters again for your time today. And I do think we had one more slide, Pratik, from SBS, so I'm just going to quickly hand it back to Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Joseph. I won't hold everyone for much longer. Thank you so much to all the wonderful presenters today. Please, please, please fill out the feedback survey. This lets us know what you thought of today's workshops. It lets us know how to make our workshops even better for you. And it also lets us communicate to the powers that be that these workshops are helpful and that we should continue doing them. Also want to plug some other upcoming events taking place courtesy of New York City SBS. You can also always browse these events on Eventbrite. And yeah, thank you so much for joining today. And if you have any questions, any further questions, you can reach out to me. My email, it's my first initial, my last name, at newyorknyc.sbs.gov. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Van Alen.